Welcome, Amjad Bhai.
Thank you very much. Sorry, my voice is a little bit down. I think I had a bit of this virus going around, so I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Welcome. Thanks for
Thank you
coming.
very much. I don't have a question, but I just want to say this lecture was very, very helpful in terms of some of the challenges I personally been going through. And, especially around negative thought and etc. So as a human, we do have, ups and downs and thoughts that do cause us, feeling down and make us depressed. But you know what? This lecture has put things in perspective and so energized me to keep going, just keep moving forward. So I just want to say thank you. It's sort of cleared my mind and I feel a bit more relaxed. So yeah, just a comment rather than any particular question.
No, thank you very much. I fully agree with you. We all go through life, particularly under a man-device system, because things are a lot of time undefined. And we feel that why it is happening to me or some of the issues about which we are not very sure. Then we go back to the Quran, and the Quran helps us to put a different perspective on that. And the first perspective is always, which comes to my mind, is that life is not going to end with death. So one of the things which came to my mind a few days ago was that we should start thinking that I'm not going to die. Just tell yourself, since we have come to the Quran, I'm not going to die. And that is a fact as well, because Quran says, "Kullu nafsin za'iqatul maut," that self will taste death. So taste death does not mean self is going to die. And so it is a transformation from one step to another. And as in that presentation, in that schematic, I said that we take a different jump from the main flow of the man-device system. We have come out of it intellectually and at a self level, and we are looking at others the way it is going. It is not to put them down, no. I wish we could establish the system or the system of being to take birth as quickly as possible, because the longer it is delayed, the longer humanity will suffer. And out there might be people who, like us, want to come onto this highway of the Quran. But patience is part of this process as well, because this is Allah's word. Of course, we are responsible while we are living in this world, but still it belongs to Allah. His ownership is still with Him. And we should try to understand it from Allah's perspective. And that is what Quran does. It makes us understand this world from Allah's perspective. And that means being companion of Allah, we are essentially sharing our responsibilities by relating it to Him. So we get a reassurance that give yourself time and things will start falling in place. Because everything in the world takes time to shape up. Our efforts are already shaping up. For example, putting together or sharing this presentation, all of us, is because of the efforts we have made in the last couple of years. So it's not one man's effort. This is what is coming out of the Quran for all of us. And our focus is not individual. Our focus is those yatim and miskin, that system of being. And all those human beings who are suffering at this point in time and going through this CBT, a person-centered therapies, need to know about the Quran as well as a choice. And I'm sure if this choice is offered to many of them, they will be more than willing to come to this path, because it's a very simple path, simple choice. It's a very simple choice. Iman is a very simple way to come on to the path of the Quran. We don't need to learn Arabic. We don't need to be like Allama Parvez and very scholarly. It's a very simple, straightforward recipe, and then start doing few good deeds, and we are on this path. And
Thank you for that. I think one of the things is change, it takes time. But
Yes.
as long as you're steady and you're moving in the right direction, things can't just happen overnight.
Yes.
You as a human being, we are living in an environment where there are challenges. I agree with you on a CBT. They will be focusing on certain element, but they won't concentrate what the root cause is, where Quran looks at the holistic. So it doesn't matter how many times they will push those fixes. The root cause, if that's not fixed, we're gonna see more and more people, suffering depression and anxiety. So Quran is wanna eliminate that the issue that arises to those anxiety. It wants to eliminate. So Quran goes far beyond what the science, or the psychology is trying to fix. So appreciate that. But what your lecture did today, it brought everything together. It just gave me that holistic view. And yeah, it so energized me into get up, Amjad, and get out of that bed and keep going. So thank you for that.
Yes. Now, this platform, as you know, is from week to week we meet up. It's also giving us that sense of association that
We
we
got
are
wonderful
together on
people on
this.
this. Yeah, we got wonderful people,
Yes.
and we should be proud.
So what I'm trying to say is that if negative, the CBT, they said automatic thoughts emerge. If thoughts come that we are doing nothing, then we should immediately go back to that where we were and where we are now. And life hasn't ended yet. Life is not going to end in any case in our case. Life is going beyond that. So that is where we have to assure our own self, and that ability to reassure our own self is part of getting educated and training on this path. Only then I can explain it to others. If I myself run away from this path, I'm not going to help others to come to this path. So
I
first thing
think,
is that I stick to it myself.
Ejaz bhai, I think going through challenges, it makes you a better person. So you go through these ups and downs in life.
That's right.
You're gonna fall back. But as long as you keep going, you're gonna get more and more stronger person. So I think that a lecture has encouraged one that look, one thing you said is you're not the only person. Sometime blame games comes in. You start, questioning yourself. But it's really, really helpful from my perspective. So I won't take any more of your time. I know Wasim Bhai has
No,
got
no,
a
you're
long
welcome. Thank you
time.
very much for your input, and as a result, we have.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Ji Wasim bhai, welcome.
Thank you. There are a few things which I wanted to add on as usual, because comments are not in terms of any sort of criticism. These are so many things, although this ayat is of a certain context, but the way it has merged into CBT is, some people can say that it's going into tangent, but it's not a tangent, it is quite related into that. However, most of the things were from that point of view. But the point, there are 2 or 3 points which I wanted to add into that. This CBT is mostly from a medical professional point of view, while the issues which were taken out was the behavior and cognitive, the behavior and other things. They are not only the medical solution, but also a subject of ethics and morality. And if we go into that direction of philosophy, into ethics and morality, then the behavior and the way you behave, that takes another direction. And Quran actually discuss it from that point of view, that the Amal Saleh and what is Amal Saleh, and the Sirat Mustaqim, and all these things actually give you that direction. So that is one point of view of discussing this thing. This cognitive behavior actually, and therapy, if we take the therapy out, cognitive processes plus behavior. the cognitive processes itself is a huge domain, and then the behavior itself, which is a process after the cognitive behavior, because all the behaviors depends upon our thinking and the cognitive processes. Now, amalgamating them can bring quite a lot of things, and that's. However, I will go back to this ayat which we discussed today, and the ayat says that Ya ayyuhallazina qad ja'akum maw'izatun min rabbikum wa shifaa'un lima fis sudur wa hudan wa rahmatan lil mu'minin. So it's interestingly, I would rather ask a lot of our colleagues who are listening that add into that this is from Rabbakum, from the Rabb. It's not from Allah. That what is the reason that this attribute of Rabb is being added? And Moizatun, I believe that's whole, the first part of the sentence, ayah, is about the whole of Quran, that this is the direction, and that direction is. And then when coming into Shifa, walima fi sudur. Now, what is Shifa? Shifa is the cure, which comes against another word which is used in Quran is maraz, and Shifa is for the maraz, and the Quran in here Washifa lima fi sudur, and sudur is also the chest, and it is also considered some of the time is qulub is used, and then sudur is used. There are certain differences between why sudur is added here instead of qulub, because this word, which is marazan, there are about 8 or 9 times in the Quran. I do have the references like Surah Baqarah 2:10 and Surah Maida 5:52, in which Fatara Lazina fi qulubihim marazan. The way this maraz is used, against which the Shifa in here is referring to, is mostly to do with the unbelievers. Allah is not talking about artery disease in the heart. This is the word which is used, sudur, which is the chest, or it could be replicated for or used for qulub as well. But this is the maraz which are for unbelievers, for munafiqeen, or who don't believe at all, or the other word is some of the time used, people who have doubts. So these 2 or 3, there might be a lot of other interpretation, because there are about 9 or 10 different references for maraz in here where Shifa fi sudur is coming. Now that Shifa is Allah is talking about. See, that Brother Amjad is talking about those things which comes to the mind, and that mind, it's Dr. Ijaz, one of the schematic is quite relevant in that we think, we act, and that act goes back into the memory as a law of requital, and not even some of the time, if we don't behave, the thought actually create a sort of vicious circle. We have to break that, because what happens, this moiza word which is used, it's a direction, and moiza is from that word was, I think, wow, and zod was, and it's a direction, a right direction, not only the direction, it's the right direction. So it might be termed as an aim of your life, that you should know what is the aim of life. And that if we know the aim of life, then we will go in line with that. And that will give a shifa to our sudur. I'm not going into the last part, which is Wahudan wa Rahmatul Lil Mu'minin. That itself is a huge, huge subject, but just restricting myself for Washifa Ulama Sudur. And some of the points which I have raised here, I believe they must be relevant. And if somebody, there's no question, you can comment on it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
No, thank you very much. I agree with your comments. Rabbukum obviously is related to Rububiyyat. And Rububiyyat is where the self's issues, both of body and human self, are taken care of. And the beauty of the Quran I've seen is that it doesn't take us into those domains which are not relevant at this stage of our existence. For example, hereafter, Quran could have given far more details about the hereafter, but it has left it to us to infer from what is already given. And one of the things which I have noticed is that as we develop ourselves, keep raising the level of our consciousness that is there, we ourselves keep understanding some of the aspects of the life of the hereafter. Because as self increases in its eminence and loftiness and comes to grips with the system of being as a concept, then it develops that assurance of the hereafter. Because as I said before as well, that the Quran, when it says that you have come to this path of Sirat al-Mustaqim, number one. Number two, you have come together and managed to remove your differences, then you need not worry about your own hereafter. The issue over here is now of working for the system of being. Because if we are worried about the hereafter, then it will slow us down. We will all the time be thinking about our own salvation, inverted commas, all the time thinking, what will happen to me? And that is why I said that it is better that we start thinking now onwards that I'm not going to die. So if I'm not going to die, the issue over here is that till the time we are getting rid of this body at some point in time, what are we going to do? How much effort we are going to put in? How much solid deeds are we going to do? How much strengthening of our mutual relationship and understanding we are going to do? How much of the Quran we are going to understand so that no aspect of the deen remains hidden as far as today's era is concerned. So these are the kind of thoughts which we need to work on, and all of us should work on it independently and of course collectively as well. There is sorry, Sahar Bhai, can we ask Dr. Yusuf Iqbal where is he, if he can?
Sure.
He's a psychiatrist. I would like to get some feedback.
Ji Yusuf Bhai, assalamu alaikum and welcome.
Wa alaikum salam. Well, today is one of the weekends I'm not at work.
Brilliant.
Yes, welcome. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you.
How are you,
thank you,
sir?
Ijaz uncle. I'm good. Thank you so much. I think it was really good presentation compiled by Dr. Ijaz uncle. It's given. Well, I'd say the first thing I would like to say is Quran is not a book of psychology. And it does not relate to psychological illnesses and their treatment. Yes, CBT and the person-centered therapy that Dr. Ijaz uncle has mentioned might have some role in sort of identifying those thoughts and feelings and how they interact with each other. But I look into it more as, and this is something we have discussed before, more like a cognitive dissonance. And I think in the verse here in the Quran, where the religious beliefs are concerned, or where these religious beliefs which are quite deeply ingrained and they are quite personal to each other, to every person. These cognitive dissonances is something like, for example, I'll give you an example for this, and just to mention, I'm not a psychologist, so I might not know in detail about these things. For example, somebody who is a smoker knows that smoking causes lung cancer. Now, there is a cognitive dissonance in their mind that, they continue to smoke. So in order to resolve that dissonance, in order to be in harmony with that dissonance, or confront that, they would either have to change the belief system that smoking doesn't cause cancer, and this research that is there is not sufficient enough to cause cancer, or there is only 1 in 100 people who get cancer. So they change their belief about what they are doing to come into terms with their dissonance, or they would change their habits or their behavior by stopping smoking to resolve that anxiety. And I think it happens in the Quran as well, and in Islam as well, where if there are cognitive dissonances related to these beliefs, a person who wants to come to terms with those anxieties created by this dissonance would be either to reflect on their beliefs, taking time, understanding their beliefs, and why somebody holds those beliefs. It would be either seeking guidance from the Quran or from the different scriptures or whatever has been written, and seeking guidance from there, or maybe considering an alternative perspective to say, this interpretation of this religious belief is wrong, and I want to follow the other one, which is in line with their belief, to resolve that cognitive dissonance. There is also, they can be open-minded to change and be open to the possibility that these beliefs may change over time. So, there are different ways of, and I think in the Quran and in this ayat, Allah has mentioned that there is a, let me get the ayah because I cannot remember it, where it says, yes, it says, يا أيها الناس قد جاءتكم موعظة من ربكم وشفاء لما في الصدور. So Allah is referring to the Quran, that there is a resolution of your cognitive dissonances in this Quran. So unless you reflect, take guidance, and change your way of understanding and interpreting this, you won't be able to find that resolution to your dissonances. And I think it's just referring to pondering and reflecting on the Quran to sort of understand your dissonances and resolve it. So I think that's, but as I said, I'm not a psychologist, so I cannot comment.
Could you please have a look on chats? And one of our sisters has asked a question regarding depression and others. Could you be able to comment on that, please?
I'll read it out, Gigi. I'll read it out to you. Our dear sister Bibi has posted regarding depression and related conditions. Are we saying that if one follows the Quran, these ailments will disappear? Many psychologists treat depression and more serious ailments with medication because CBT alone does not treat brain chemistry imbalances. Thank you.
Yes, so the simple answer to this question is no, because as I said, Quran is not a book of medicine, or it's not a book of psychology, so it won't treat the chemical imbalances that results in depression or anxiety or schizophrenia or other related mental health disorders. Yes, CBT or other talking therapies might be helpful in sort of countering or coming to terms with the mental illness. But she is right. I don't think, understanding the Quran would treat your depression or would treat the schizophrenia. It's not possible, and it's not how it should be interpreted. It's a book of guidance, and a book of guidance how to live a life. So, I think depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, all these mental disorders there is an environmental cause to it as well, but also genetic and your upbringing and your vulnerabilities that could, combine together and give rise to an illness. So I think it's the same as somebody who has got a fractured bone. So, by understanding the Quran, that bone will not heal unless you do something about it. So the same is for depression, anxiety, or anything else. Yeah, I don't know, but I think the simple answer is no.
One question, that's all. If a person who is suffering from depression and others, if we are in a position, I know we can't, but if we are in a position to offer them the guidance of the Quran and they're willing to come to this, and while they are taking those medicines, will in the long run this be helpful in changing the outlook of life?
Changing the outlook of life, yes, but treating the depression, no, because I think depression is mainly because of the imbalance in one of the hormones in your brain and how it functions, and the medications are there to increase that level of hormone in your brain. So I think, yes, the outlook of life will change, and that can be done through meditation and all, other mindfulness, CBT, all these different kind of therapies that can help someone to get a grasp of their thoughts, their feelings, and their behaviors in the long run. Coming to the Quran, yes, because Quran has got the answers to all the ambiguities that people have, and sometimes the ambiguities in itself causes this discomfort, and then like, what's the meaning of life? Why am I even here? What will happen to me when I die? So those kind of things, then when they start thinking about those things, that can develop depression and all that.
In your experience, just sorry, again, another question from
That's okay.
When I say I, that is when we are, for example, I'll give you an example from my own myself, that when I was suffering from this corona, and it was quite a debilitating illness, I was fully aware, because I used it to analyze my own self and its relationship to brain and intellect. And I was fully aware or conscious of what was going on in my thoughts and in my body. And I could easily dissociate myself, that is I, from what was going on. For example, at a stage I felt, when I was admitted in hospital, I felt a bit claustrophobic. And I never felt like that before and after. And I said that this possibly be related to this virus. But I was able to control that by understanding it, that this is what is happening, and it is a very physical thing rather than the issue of my thought process as such. So how do you view it? I don't know about this.
I mean, physical conditions, as I would be looking into this issue from a medical point of view. So, like, for example, with the coronaviruses, there is a surge of a lot of inflammatory processes going on in the body, and a release of a lot of cytokines, what we call, which are in response to any infection or stress or an insult in the body, which then affects on your body physically, and also sometimes can impact on the way people think. But I think it varies from person to person, and the resilience that you have, the ability to sort of dissociate from your physical condition, that from the suffering that you are going through, is something that differs from person to person. And I think it comes from life experiences, knowledge, understanding, and all this would be, part and parcel of it. I think, somebody else in your shoes, if they have the same illness, but might not have the same resilience, might not have been able to sort of cope, and they probably would have gone into, and we have seen that, that with coronavirus, a lot of people come with depression, a lot of people who had schizophrenia in the past and have become well for a number of years and had coronavirus and has relapsed into their mental illness. So, I think it's all come down to how resilient you are, what your understanding is about the physical imbalances, and how you separate them from your thought processes. So I think it would differ from person to person.
No, thank you very much. I think thank you.
Thank you.
But going back to, sorry, afterthought, that resilience, is that resilience related to because of our being in the Quran? Because Quran does help. I was very conscious of it at that time, for example, that what if I die and this whole thing will stop, the work which we are doing? And that was a very critical moment 2 years ago. Now, of course, we have made a significant progress. And I said the answer to that was coming to me that no, it is not possible. That reassurance kind of a thing which comes. And this is one aspect which I think all of us should try to explore further. That by dissociate, because my view is when I was going through this presentation, Dr. Saab, that I was trying to see that how much of higher self-awareness we have acquired through the Quran, that we can dissociate our own self from what is going on around us and within our own body and in our own brain, and the way we are looking at things more objectively rather than subjectively.
I agree, Ijaz Uncle. And I think the thing is, when you have mentioned about the, and we do it in every lecture about the attributes that we have. So I think those attributes are there to help with that resilience. Now, maybe I can give you an example of, or maybe you have seen it in your sort of in your own home environment as well. So, for example, you've got, let's say, two kids. That two kids have got, two same parents, two same genetic material, to same environment to grow, but both those kids would be completely opposite of how they react to certain emotional dilemma that comes to you. So one might be more resilient than the other. So I think it's maybe inherent, plus also how you have developed that over time. And certainly Quran and its teachings of how to develop yourself, certainly with no doubt helps.
Oh, excellent. Thank you very much. That was very good.
Thank you, Ijaz bhai, and thank you, Dr. Saab. I think Wasim bhai, let's go to Haroon, and then you may come back. Ji, Haroon beta, welcome, and good to have you here, sir.
Thank you, Uncle. I just wanted to, I guess my question is related to your goals in life and your aim, and how important are they to resolve cognitive dissonances. I was watching a lecture on basically talking about the psychopathology of polytheism, and they spoke about how if you have multiple, well, essentially having a goal, all positive emotion comes from your movement forward in relationship to goals, and so essentially, in order to experience the most amount of positive emotion, one must have integrated as much of one's thoughts and movement and behavior into one higher goal. And then you get this sense of depth or highness, which means that, well, you need a goal which is going to encompass as much of your thoughts and behaviors as possible. And into that goal, and maybe integrated other goals, but you have to have some sort of higher purpose, which brings it all together into one. If you have multiple goals, then you're essentially fragmenting your ability to move forward, and therefore you're sort of diluting the amount of positive emotion that you can feel. And that is suboptimal relative to having one particular goal. And if you have no goals or no consciously abstracted goals, then essentially you leave yourself vulnerable to being fragmented into possibly infinite number of pieces. And therefore, with every movement forward in life, you're taking on an increasing number. You're being pulled in an increasing number of different directions, and therefore increasing your tendency to experience one, anxiety, because if you're being pulled in different directions, you don't know how to move forward, which is a cause of anxiety or entropy signaling. And if you are not moving forward in relationship to any goal, then you'll feel grief or despair, i.e. negative emotion. So what I was wondering, I guess, this is obviously a very complex issue, and I think, for the sake of argument, it's probably easier to leave more complex psychological conditions like mania, psychosis, schizophrenia out as a question, because they're very poorly understood. However, taking grief or taking anxiety where there's no obvious environmental stimulus for the anxiety or grief, again, that seems more pathological. So that's not normal for someone to have a generally good life in the traditional sense and still experience these sorts of emotions. But then you have strange situations in the West where the vast majority of mental illness, which is dealt with, is actually people who have difficulties in life and are unable to contend with them. And that's interesting because that's not actually pathological. You could say that's more physiological. That's a natural response of the mind if it does not have the value structure to contend with the suffering they're faced with, and suffering is an inherent part of life. So what I was wondering was, is the Quran's quite clear, like it's very clear, and maybe we just don't understand it well enough, but it's very clear in Surah Yunus, especially where it says that the friends of Allah will have no fear, no anxiety, and no grief, and the subsequent verses state that that's in this life. So there's clearly some sort of correlation with positive and negative emotion, and whether that's categorized into diseases isn't clear because we've made up arbitrary definitions for diseases, and this was obviously written 1300 years ago. So understanding it in the modern context is going to be difficult, but you can understand it relative to positive and negative emotion. And what I was wondering was, having a clear idea of Allah and having a clear idea of His facets and what you're aiming for, what exactly He wants from you in life, is that a high enough goal to integrate all other goals into? And is that why Allah promises us freedom from negative emotion? Essentially my question, if that makes sense.
No, this is one of the things which is for me as well, that if we set a very high goal in life, and what can be a higher goal than making Allah as a model and try to manifest all those attributes, whichever we can within the means available to us, and becoming very conscious of all our thoughts, feelings, deeds, everything, and then aiming for the system of being. Because the basic premise, as far as I can see from the Quran, is that we should be dissatisfied, or we should be quite not comfortable with the man-made world and the slavery of the man-made system in which we lose a lot of our freedom. And to be conscious of losing that freedom is very important, because if I'm conscious that I have less freedom and I want more freedom and I desire more freedom, then I will essentially make an effort and try to find a solution for those issues. And because life is about making efforts, and life is about not running out of challenges. And if we run out of challenges in life, then that means essentially we are stagnating, and that is what Quran says, we are in a state of jihad. And when we are stagnant, that is the workshop, this is the idle man's workshop, something like that, that it is Satan comes and occupies it. And that brings hopelessness. So running out of challenges in life is very dangerous recipe. And Quran, when it says that your aim of life is to develop yourself and bring out your potentials, then essentially it is asking that don't be stagnant and keep looking for challenges in life. And what can be a better challenge than to manifest Allah's attributes in our personality at every point in time? Even a small thing, for example, you go to the shop and speak to someone, and exchanging some positive remarks will help. Or doing your bit by following the law to the best of your ability, or talking to someone who is not well, or even inquiring about the welfare of others. And these things move us away from our own issues of life. And when these move us away from our own issues of life, then essentially we avoid distractions and we remain focused. And a lot of these issues of ours arise because of irregularity in our thoughts. Because the way the world is and its issues are, we can see that there is a lot of uncertainty in the air. And one of the things which we should guard against is that when we come to the Quran, we become far more aware of what is going on in the world. Previously, for example, Russia-Ukraine war wouldn't have bothered us. or what is going on in Pakistan wouldn't have bothered us, particularly those who are in the West. But now it bothers us because we are looking at the problems of humanity across the globe, and we are worried that what is going on in other parts of the world. And we look at this possibility that the system of being is not around the corner. It is, and how do we come to grips with our own thought process? And then for that, we have to look towards Allah, because Allah is looking at all this whole issues of human life, and we define our role within the constraints in which we live. You know, for me, for example, if I start worrying about all human beings who are suffering in Africa because of hunger and poverty, that worry is meaningless because I cannot do anything for that. So that is how we have to. So part of our self-development is to understand these things. Otherwise, we end up frustrated and not letting Allah go away from. But one thing is, all of us should be absolutely sure that we should not undervalue our own efforts. We have left the old beliefs, we have left, given up all that we were part of previously, and we have selected for ourselves a new path of life cognitively. And this new path of life, we can check it against external criteria, not our own internal criteria. Because our emotions, our desires can self-justify anything. So it is the Quranic criteria we have to use to verify our own cognitive development, our own self-development and thoughts. And that is extremely important. And hopefully in the next presentation, I will cover some of these aspects. And today's presentation and the previous one, and of course, a few others in which, for example, Allah says that I don't do zulm to anyone, which is human beings who do zulm to others. We have reached quite a higher level of understanding, where now onwards we will see that things will expand far more from the verses which are coming up than we see.
Thank you. Go ahead, Wasim bhai.
Thank you once again. Coming back to the 2 points, which one point is Brother Yusuf Iqbal and
a bit louder, please. Wasim, bit louder. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I don't know.
No, you're right. You're fine now. It's right.
Okay. Okay. See that the word which was used, the term which was used, cognitive dissonance. That's quite a heavy word, but if I'm correct, that it is the note in harmony is called the dissonance. So that aspect which correlate with the other previously which I have mentioned, the maraz Quran is mentioning is for unbeliever or the people who have doubt. Now that doubt for not having a clear path, the unbelievers or the munafiqeen or the doubtful people, they have the maraz in their qulub. That is to do with the cognitive dissonance to a certain level. I'm not saying it's altogether. There might be some medical or other reasons, but in the code of ethics and morality, that comes if you are clear, have less doubt or no doubts, then your aim is clearer and you can follow that. And within this ayat, actually the last part is after this shifa, then there's a word huda and then rahmat. Now these two, the huda is, what is that hidayat? Hidayat is for that sirat al-mustaqim. That is the right path. And that goes to the question which Harun was mentioning, that once you have that these two or three things together, then you know that who is Allah and what is our aim. And the more you go through that, the more stronger iman it comes. Just before this presentation, I was talking to Dr. Ijaz. See that word belief, faith, and Iman, which are English and Arabic. Iman is the word which we take it as a translation for faith and belief. But to me, Iman have a much higher meaning than these belief. And it takes out that doubts, even from those concepts which are not even 100% clear to you, but you are on the right path in the right direction, where your belief is also, using that word, your Iman is to the level that your heart is satisfied. And that's the root word coming from for Iman, that your heart becomes satisfied. It goes into Aman, with the peace. And that is a level of Iman. And once you have that, then your path becomes unidirectional, clearer. And that's the whole ayat of this is actually talking about Shifa Sudur and Huda and Rahmat. Rahmat is also, it's a huge concept which we have discussed number of times. And they all fall together to give us a direction. That's the point.
Oh, thank you very much for that elaboration. If Tagar, somebody on your side wanted to ask a comment.
Thank you. My question was, as we covered in our last talk, we do zulm to ourselves. Allah does not do zulm to anyone. These imbalances that we were talking about, how and why, what is the cause of those to occur in the first place? These imbalances of one sort or another. Would it be that the wrong environment, as we are developing from childhood to adulthood, wrong beliefs, wrong environment starts to lay the foundations for those to grow on? That's my question.
I'll try.
We can discuss it next time if we don't have
we can.
time.
We can. No, it's an excellent question, because why these imbalances become created, and why human beings Allah has created so complex. I have given it a lot of thought, and I keep thinking on these things because I got plenty of time. I'm a retired person. So the issue which is before us as human beings is that the I which is given to us with this associated consciousness, and I dissociate my consciousness from my brain. You know, the modern psychology are the people who do not think that there is a life beyond that. They say that brain dead, we are dead. But if you remember, we go back to that verse where Quran says that when you go to sleep, that your brain is taking rest, and your consciousness is suspended. And if we take as a fact, and which is a fact, and we can test it as well, that I and consciousness, which is given to us, has to go into eternity. It is actually in a state of eternity. That is, at this time when we are talking, it is not going to die. It is immortal. Now, what is given to it is something which is mortal, that is brain and body. And brain and body, we know body's whole neurological system with neurons is contributing to our intellect and our reasoning and everything. And Dr. Yusuf has raised his hand, and I think the best is let me ask him what he thinks. But basically, imbalances are created by our brain itself, the way we are educated and training and the way we are brought up within the family and the environment. Because 5 senses which we have, we get data through these senses, and we create a picture of the world around us. And that picture which is forming within our mind, within our brain, within our consciousness is the one which is influenced by our own value system. And if all of that is based on relative values, not on permanent values, and the world which we have around us is also imbalanced, then 100% we will have imbalances. The degree to which those imbalances will exist will be dependent on our physical environment and the way we are thinking. The Quran is doing two things. Once it is telling us that there are imbalances, there will always be imbalances in a man and device system, number one. And number two, in order to remove those imbalances, you have to recognize that those imbalances exist, and you should create a desire and a need to come out of it. And that is where then the guidance comes in, desire for guidance comes in. So this is something in short I can think of. Let's go to Dr. Yusuf. Yes, please, Dr.
Thank you. Yeah. So I think, Iftikhar Uncle, when you mentioned about the imbalances, and again, I would go back to, I know it's a big term, but back to cognitive dissonance and what causes it. So I think we need to first understand what is the cognitive dissonance. And it's basically an inconsistency or a discrepancy between a person's beliefs, their attitudes, and their behaviors, their values, and all that. If there is an inconsistency between that, it causes this impairment, imbalance. And it can be caused by like a variety of factors. A lot of things can cause it. New information or new experiences. So like when a new information is presented to you, and that challenges your existing beliefs or your values or your existent attitudes, that can create the dissonance. Or an inconsistent behavior, where I previously, when I gave the example of someone who is smoking, and that again is something, when your behavior, what you're doing is inconsistent with your beliefs or what is known, can cause the dissonance. Social pressure can cause the dissonance. And also, I think the most important is self-perception. When someone's own perception is in conflict with their behavior and their beliefs, it can cause this dissonance. And I think it all resonates with the Quran when the Quran presents the information, and the message of the Quran is very dynamic. So it's not static like the other books, like books of hadith and stuff, because there's nothing that you can change in those. Whereas in the Quran, in Quran's message, it's very dynamic, and it's for each and every era. So maybe 1,000 years ago, you probably wouldn't have understood the Quran the way we are understanding it now. And maybe, in the next 100 years, there would be a more better understanding of the Quran. And that is the beauty of the Quran. And that's why Allah had said that, in each and every era where there is a discrepancy, there is an imbalance that arises between those formed beliefs and what you observe and see and, understand, it will evolve as you go along. So I think just wanted to add that point, and I agree with Dr. Ijaz as well.
No, thank you very much. That's excellent. But I think, Iftikhar bhai, let's leave it for some more presentations.
Sure.
Frankly, I will give it some more thought as well.
Sure. Sister B has pointed another message, but we will deal with it probably in our next talk. Let's have the final words from Salim bhai in Lahore. The talk will be incomplete without his contribution.
बहुत शुक्रिया इफ्तिखार साहब मौका देने का। आज की प्रेजेंटेशन हमेशा की तरह बहुत अच्छी थी, और जो दो चीजें खास तौर पर मैंने सीखी हैं वो ये है कि एक तो प्रेजेंटेशन में एक नुक्ता बड़ा काम का मेरे हाथ आया कि इलाज वो बंदा कर सकता है, यानी किसी दूसरे की सीने के अमराज का इलाज वो बंदा कर सकता है जिसका अपना शरह सदर हो चुका हो। यानी कि ऐसा बंदा किसी दूसरे के डिप्रेशन का इलाज नहीं कर सकता जो खुद डिप्रेशन में मुब्तला हो। इसके लिए एक तो ये बड़ा बुनियादी नुक्ता मैंने आज सीखा, और दूसरा बड़े काम की बात डॉक्टर इजाज साहब ने ये बताई کہ جو علاج ہوتا ہے ڈپریشن کا یا نفسیاتی امراض کا، علاج کرنے کے بعد واپس وہاں بھیج دیا جاتا ہے انسان کو جہاں سے وہ بیمار ہو کے آیا تھا. تو یہ بڑی کام کی باتیں تھیں. باقی جو باتیں ہو رہی ہیں صدر کے حوالے سے وسیم بھائی نے بات کی، تو صدر کا لفظ بڑا اہم ہے. اسی کو سمجھنے سے کافی سارے جو سوالات آ رہے ہیں وہ سمجھ میں آ جائیں گے. یہاں برین کی بات نہیں ہو رہی. تو امراض سینہ، صدر کو اگر ہم اردو میں کہیں سینے کے امراض، تو مراد یہ ہے کہ یہاں حضرت موسیٰ نے بھی یہی دعا مانگی تھی، رب اشرح لی صدری، اور حضور علیہ الصلوۃ والسلام کے بارے میں بھی اللہ تعالیٰ نے یہی کہا، الم نشرح لک صدرک، کہ کیا ہم نے آپ کا سینہ کھول نہیں دیا، اور جو ایسا بوجھ جو تمہاری کمر توڑ رہا تھا وہ بوجھ ہم نے ہٹا نہیں دیا، ورفعنا لک ذکرک. تو یہ صدر کی اصطلاح بڑی اہم ہے. اور ایک سوال جو آ رہا ہے ابھی کہ جو میڈیکیشن ہوتی ہے ذہنی امراض کے لیے، تو یوسف اقبال صاحب کا یہ فیلڈ ہے، یہ بہتر جانتے ہیں کہ جتنی بھی میڈیسنز دی جاتی ہیں وہ برین کے لیے دی جاتی ہیں، جبکہ یہ ڈپریشن، مایوسی اور نفسیاتی امراض جو ہیں برین کے امراض ہیں ہی نہیں. تو یہ نفس کے امراض ہیں، یا آپ اسے کہہ لیں کہ صدر کے امراض ہیں. تو یہ ساری جو دوائیاں دی جاتی ہیں وہ ساری ضائع جاتی ہیں، بلکہ اور زیادہ نقصانات کا باعث بنتی ہیں. تو یہ جو امراض ہیں عدم توازن کے، سوچنے کے، قول و فعل کے تضاد کے، راستہ نہ ملنے کے، یہ برین کے مسائل ہیں ہی نہیں. اور اس پر آج کل کے جو میڈیکل کے ماہرین ہیں ان کے اس میں درجنوں بلکہ سینکڑوں سٹڈیز شائع ہو چکی ہیں کہ جتنی بھی یہ میڈیسن دی جاتی ہے برین کی وہ ساری فضول ہے، اور اس سے کبھی کسی کو آرام نہیں آتا. تو یہ صدور کے مسئلے ہیں، نہ کہ برین کے مسئلے ہیں. بہت شکریہ.
تھینک یو ویری مچ. میرا اپنا جو اسیسمنٹ ہے نا اپنا اس پہ، وہ یہ ہے کہ چونکہ دین تو ہے نہیں، تو اس لیے اس پہ بڑی ریسرچ کی ضرورت ہوگی ایز اینڈ وین سسٹم آف دین آئے گا. اور اس پہ ویسٹرن سائیکالوجی میں بھی وہ کہتے ہیں مائنڈ اوور میٹر کی بات کرتے ہیں، یا مائنڈ اینڈ باڈی ریلیشن شپ. تو اس پہ چونکہ ان کے پاس قرآن کی آؤٹ لک تو ہے نہیں، تو جو ہی ہم یہ سوچتے ہیں کہ لائف نے ڈیتھ کے ساتھ ختم ہو جانا ہے، تو پھر ایوری پاسنگ ڈے ون از اے لوزر. ویئرز قرآن کی جو آؤٹ لک ہے وہ ٹوٹلی ڈفرینٹ ہے، اپوزٹ ہے اس کے. تو یہ چیز ہم سب کو ذہن میں رکھیں کہ جب ہم کوئی بھی سسٹم دین کا آئے گا تو اس پہ ہم یہ ایک بہت بڑا ایریا ہوگا جہاں پہ ریسرچ کی ضرورت ہوگی کہ ہیومن تھاٹس جو ہیں وہ کیسے باڈی کو ریگولیٹ کرتی ہیں. اور جو لوگ اس پہ جن کے پاس ایمان آ جاتا ہے اور صالح ڈیڈز کرتے ہیں، تو ان کی جو کنوکشن ہے وہ کس طرح افیکٹ کرتی ہے ان کی آؤٹ لک کو، اور ان کی باڈی کو، ان کے بیہیویئر کو، اور دوسروں کی کیسے کرتی ہے. ایک تو بڑا ویزیبل ہے نا کہ وہ نیچرلی گڈ ہو جاتے ہیں، قرآن کا کرائٹیریا یوز کرنا شروع ہو جاتے ہیں، لیکن اندر جو کیمیکل بیلنس ہے اس پہ کیا افیکٹ پڑتا ہے. افکورس یہ تو نہیں ہو سکتا کہ وہ اپنی ڈائٹ ان کی بیلنس نہیں ہے اور وہ سگریٹیں پیتے ہیں، سچویشن ٹوٹلی ڈفرینٹ ہو جائے گی. تو یہ دیر آر لاٹ آف کوسچنس اینڈ وی لیو اٹ فار